During the 2019 season, seeing bomber Connor McKenna run off half back, or cat Zach Tui collect the ball in defence is nothing to blink an eye over. However, just 30 years ago, Ireland was an untapped wealth for AFL talent. That is, until coaching staff at the Melbourne Football Club hatched a left field plan to scout Irishmen playing in the local amateur competition, Gaelic League football, a sport considered AFL's closest relative. In 1984, 18-year-old Jim Stynes was filling in for a Gaelic team when he was invited to a Melbourne trial by Baruhas and his Irish experiment team. Having just been accepted into college, Jim's father Brian allowed Jim to attend the trial, but warned him that he had better not get picked. The prospects were put through a series of introductory and skill-based activities, including a lengthy speech from Baruhas about the ins and outs of AFL football, a speech that he later discovered had not been understood in the slightest by his young Irish audience. The activities were designed to identify if there was any players who possessed the credentials of an Australian rules footballer. Stynes was naturally a standout to recruiters. Despite towering at 199 centimetres, he possessed a gut-busting running capacity, a combination that made the Irish lad a promising ruck prospect for the Demons. After Jim was indeed offered a spot, Brian conceded that the opportunity was too good to pass up, allowing Jim to pack up home in Ireland and join the Demons on their return trip. While a romanticist may have assumed that Jim moved to Australia and the rest was history, to simplify an Irishman's rise to becoming one of the greatest footballers the game has seen would be a tragic injustice to the story that followed, a tale that Melbourne captain Gary Lyon dubbed the greatest footy story our game has seen. While Jim's athleticism was simply too great to ignore in Ireland, back in Melbourne he found himself at the bottom of the pecking order, the Demons already possessing able ruck talent in Stephen O'Dwyer. Instead, Jim was to learn the trade. During intra-club matches, Jim was shadowed by an assistant coach, given instructions on how to play, where to run, and what to do. A plan that was intended to fast-track his Australian rules development. His efforts, however, were not enough to break into the senior side, and despite a season in the under-19s that won him second in the best and fairest, he was still a way off earning senior selection. In 1986, Melbourne found themselves in a precarious position. Jim was now too old to continue playing in the under-19s, and senior ruckman's performances ensured Jim remained in the reserves. As a result, it was deduced halfway through the season that loaning Jim to VFA Team Paran would be the best interim option. Melbourne staff saw the VFA as the much-needed opportunity for Jim to develop both the skill and the grit needed to play at the top level. Just 12 games for Paran was enough for him to return to Melbourne with another runner-up best and fairest. At the age of 23, Stynes finally made his debut in round 3 of the 1987 Premiership season against Geelong at Cardinia Park, albeit playing as Melbourne's third ruck option. Despite being dropped after his first match, Jim worked his way back into the side, and by the end of the home and away season, had solidified his spot for a first taste of finals footy. In the 1987 preliminary final, Jim lived his greatest fear, making a mistake at the crucial moment of a game, when Hawthorn's Gary Bacanara was awarded a free kick on the edge of the 50 as the final siren sounded, Hawthorn trailing by just 4 points. As Bacanara lined up for goal, an unsuspecting Jim Stynes ran through the man on the mark, conceding a 15-metre penalty and a regulation set shot from 35 metres out. One of the league's known sharpshooters, Bacanara did not disappoint, the final score reading Hawthorn 11-14-80 to Melbourne 10-18-78, booking Hawthorn a spot in a grand final they would go on to win. Motivated by his season-ending blunder, Jim dedicated himself to his training, returning for seasons 88, 89 and 90 to become not only a mainstay in Melbourne seniors, but one of their most valuable players. By 1991, Jim looked as if he had been playing AFL his entire life, breaking Melbourne's own club record for most marks in a season, with a league-leading 214. Having secured his first Melbourne best and fairest, all eyes turned to the highest individual honour of our game, the Brownlow Medal. Jim was the strongest favourite the Brownlow had ever seen, and the count didn't disappoint, holding off West Coast star Craig Turley 25 to 20 votes. Jim's acquisition of the medal earning him a spot among the game's greats. In true Jim Stynes fashion, it was his father who joined him on stage with Bruce McAvaney. Jim attributed his success to the undying support of his dad, that no matter what, Brian had stood up for him when no one else would, giving Jim the drive and the confidence to put together a Brownlow winning season. 7 reliable seasons later, Jim and Melbourne came to the mutual agreement that it was time for him to make way for younger players. Jim retired at the end of the 1988 season as Melbourne legend, boasting 264 career games, 4 club best and fairests, the club record for most consecutive games, a Brownlow medal, and was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2003, just 5 years later. A career that was enough to earn him a prized MCG statue outside the home of football. However, Jim's retirement is far from where his story ends. Throughout his career, Jim had always enjoyed helping others, in particular working with young people. When he met Australian actor Paul Curry, the two realised that they had a strong common value. They wanted to see young people happy. The result was what is now one of Australia's largest not-for-profit youth organisations, launching the Reach Foundation in 1994. In their eyes, Reach would inspire young people to believe in themselves and get the most out of life. Post-retirement, Jim used Reach to replace the buzz that he once got from playing in the AFL. Today, the Reach Foundation operates at hubs all across Melbourne and Sydney, with thousands of young Australians attending workshops each year. In 2008, Jim was ready for a return to football, expressing an interest in the presidential role at Melbourne. By June, current President Paul Gardner made way for Stynes. Just 1 year into his presidency, on the 2nd of July 2009, Jim held a press conference to inform the Australian public that he had been diagnosed with cancer. A melanoma that started in his back had spread to other regions of his body. Despite the diagnosis, Jim made it clear that he would not be stepping down as president. By April next year, Jim's health had taken a turn for the worse, and he was forced to have surgery on a brain metastasis. In his spare time, he took part in filming a documentary about his life with close friends Jules Lund and Paul Curry, titled Every Heart Beats True. At the end of 2011, Jim expressed a desire to focus his energy on his family and his health, and would thus cease his time as Melbourne's president, having increased membership sales, fought off any threat of relocation, and even taught Prince William how to kick a footy. With the support of his family, Jim applied himself to his health, combining alternative and Western medicine in an attempt to spend as much time with his family as possible. On the morning of the 20th of March 2012, news spread across Melbourne that Jim Stynes had lost his battle with cancer at the age of 45. Aside from his footballing accolades, Jim had started a youth organisation, been nominated for Victorian of the Year, awarded the Order of Australia, and raised massive sums of money for charity. In a tribute to Jim Stynes, Gary Lyon shared a particularly memorable quote. Jimmy refused to let the game define who he was. It was just a part of him, and it allowed us to marvel at his determination, unwavering self-belief, resilience, strength, skill, endurance, and courage. Not only did Jim pave the way for overseas players to follow, but in many ways he rewrote what it means to be an AFL footballer, and showed what players who are fortunate enough to be in their position can give back to their fans and the community. Now, every year on Brownlow Night, the Jim Stynes Award is presented by his daughter Matisse, recognising an AFL player's outstanding service to the community. No one epitomises that it's more than a game like Jim Stynes.